Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Mordecai, and welcome to another episode of Discovering Your Mission, the show where we sit down with leaders, educators, and change makers to explore the journeys, values, and defining moments that shape their life's work. I've always believed that every person has a mission. It's not just something you stumble into by accident. It's something that you discover through experience, through challenge, and through a deep commitment to serving others. On today's episode, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Donna J. Nicol, Associate Dean in the College of Liberal Arts at California State University, Long Beach, and the author of the powerful and thought-provoking book, Black Woman on Board. Her work shines a light on the remarkable story of Dr. Claudia Hampton and the strategic leadership that helped expand access and opportunity for countless students. Discovering Your Mission is proudly sponsored by the EDU Ledger, a national voice covering the future of higher education, leadership, and workforce transformation. Let's lean in, listen closely, and continue the work of discovering our mission together. Greetings, everyone. It's Dr. Mordecai, and thank you so much again for joining me for this episode of Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai, sponsored by the EDU Ledger. I am honored to have on today's show someone who I had a chance to actually meet at the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities as she was talking about this amazing breakthrough book that she had written, and I hadn't read it yet, but I recall going to Amazon, and then I looked her up online, and I read this amazing book titled Black Woman on Board. I want to introduce to you all on today Dr. Donna J. Nicols. She is the Associate Dean of Personnel and Curriculum in the College of Liberal Arts at California State University and author of this amazing book, Black Woman on Board. How are you doing, Dr. Nicols?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I remember the session that I was in where you had stood up and held this book up and began to tell a little bit of this story. And I'm so glad that you did, because truly this was not on my radar. We're going to talk about this book on today, but also I want the viewers and those that are listening to get a chance to know you a little bit. So you have been serving in this role for how long, and what has led you into this passion work of serving at CSU Long Beach?
So I've been in this particular role for 2 years as Associate Dean. I came from 20 years of being faculty in Women's Studies and Africana Studies at 2 other CSU campuses. So I've been in 3 CSU campuses. Did a decade at Cal State Fullerton in Women's Studies, and then I did 7 years and some change at Cal State Dominguez as the chair of Africana Studies. So I've seen the CSU as a student and faculty, and now as an administrator.
Did you always know you wanted to be in the academy? Has this always been a passion for you?
I had a moment in undergrad where I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor, but me and math don't get along. And so I am a 3rd generation history major. So that was the passion. I always loved history because of the way my mother and my grandmother brought it to life for me as a kid. And so once I switched majors to history, I said either I'm going to go into law or I'm going to be a professor. And that's pretty much how it went. I stayed with a major that I was passionate about, as opposed to one that I thought might be lucrative. But it's rich in the end because I'm doing the things that I really enjoy.
For those that are listening to this inspired and they're now beginning to see and hear your journey and saying, okay, hold on, I'm finding some connection here. I'm just curious, before we get into the book, what have been some of the lessons that you've learned along the way that perhaps you can share with that audience, or you wish somebody would have told you, it would have helped save you some time?
Well, I think one of the first lessons is for me to have pride in my heritage and in my family. I think for a lot of African Americans, it's, people talk about having imposter syndrome and feeling like they don't belong. But I always felt like I belonged because I knew the lineage I came from.
Yes.
And so I think because of instilling a sense of pride and curiosity also about um, African American history, about being a woman, about uh, growing up in Compton. My family made sure I had the kind of psychic armor that prepares you to go into spaces that weren't designed for you. So I think that's one of the key lessons. I think one of the things that I learned very early was that don't be dismissive of people who don't have as much education as you or who have less education than you. I learned a lot of practical lessons from my grandmothers. One of my grandmothers uh, had a sixth grade education, grew up in Flat Creek, Alabama, so, and I remember her telling me one time, girl, you can't go up into these jobs and make people think you know more than them. And I said, why would I make myself smaller? I know who I am. I'm confident. And she said, yeah, but there's going to be a price to pay for that confidence. And I said, what? And so, I dismissed it. And then I had that first job where I was doing all the things and doing well. And I did not get that promotion. And I went back and told my grandmother, and she said, I might not have all the education, but I could figure out some stuff with common sense.
Right on.
Yeah. And so she said, I'm not telling you to not, take in the information, but you got to be strategic about how you use it. And so, her telling me this, to be mindful and strategic, really carried me through my career, actually.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, as we've gotten a sense of who the person is, who the author is, the story there. Now let's talk about Dr. Claudia Hampton, because I will tell you, such a titan that whose life and works needs to be elevated, but thanks to you, that work has now been elevated. Can you bring us into the significance? Who is Dr. Claudia Hampton? Who was Dr. Claudia Hampton?
So Dr. Claudia Hampton was an educator pretty much her entire life. She was the first Black woman trustee in the California State University system. And she was also a K through 12 school teacher and administrator. And so I found her by luck going through a photo archive about an organization my grandmother had created and saw this picture of this Black woman on a podium for commencement. And it said, Trustee Claudia Hampton, appointed by Ronald Reagan. And I said, what? I
Come
said, that
again.
Ronald Reagan? I mean, you should have seen my face. Like, I know you lying. Um, and so I did a cursory look up of who she was on Google, and I said, "How have I never heard about her before?" And I was, um, I was in the Cal State system for my bachelor's degree, my master's degree. I never heard of this woman. And so I just started, it's like you kind of pull one strand and you keep pulling and pulling and pulling. And eventually it became this book project. And the reason why she's important isn't because she's the first. Sometimes I think we use the first as a marker of racial progress, and that's not always what it is. It's just the first because people were trifling. Um, her story is important because of what she did with being the first, how she maneuvered to make sure that affirmative action in particular, because she was appointed in 1974 by Ronald Reagan, just as affirmative action rules were starting to get solidified. She shepherded affirmative action in the Cal State system to make sure that those forces that were against it, even the ones that seemingly would be supportive, like Jerry Brown, um, she was like the vanguard to make sure that they gave affirmative action careful consideration.
Mm.
And so I thought, you know, we we don't really know affirmative action well. And what I mean by that is people mistake non-discrimination policy for affirmative action, and they're two sides of the same coin. And so I was getting an education, like a legal education while I was, doing this research. And so I found her style to be pretty fascinating because it was so different than my own politics. My own politics is gone. I was raised in the Black radical tradition. You speak truth to power. You don't like make yourself small. But Claudia Hampton taught me some strategies real quick about there's some alternate ways of exercising power and exercising power for a greater good.
Dr. Nicol, can you let us into now? Of course, we want everyone to buy this book. We want everyone to check this book out. But are there some higher level strategies that Dr. Claudia Hampton utilized that we can learn today and help us navigate it? Because she certainly used it to navigate boardrooms and various power structures. And so, can you let us into some of that strategy?
Yeah, so I describe her overall strategy as a strategy called sly civility. And so sly civility is a resistance strategy that was first coined by an Indian cultural theorist, Homi Bhabha. And so Homi Bhabha says that there are multiple ways that oppressed people can resist oppression. And one of those ways is sly civility. So sly civility requires you to be civil with the people who have power in order for you to gain access to their institutions, their resources, their opportunities, and then you slyly pass on those resources and opportunities to members of your community. So you place yourself in situations where you can learn everything you can in order to help your people out. But you do it in such a way where the people in power don't know that you are passing information on to other communities.
This episode of Discovering Your Mission is brought to you by the EDU Ledger, a leading publication committed to advancing the conversations shaping today's higher education landscape. From innovative practices to policy insights and leadership perspectives, the EDU Ledger brings clarity to the issues surrounding educational opportunity that matter most. To stay informed and engaged, visit theeduledger.com. Now, let's get to today's conversation. Let's switch gears here. In some systems, institutions, boards are elected. They're locally elected boards. There in California, and it may still stand to this day, but your board members are appointed by the governor.
Yes.
And so that appointment has a different dynamic. Certainly, this is all a part of that dynamic that played into Dr. Claudia Hampton's not only placement, but rise through the ranks. Give us just a sense of I can only imagine you learned so much more about board politics, board dynamics, board structures, and the impacts of boards. Kind of let us into a little bit of that wisdom that you've learned along the way as you were telling Dr. Hampton's story.
Yeah, so it's true that in California and in a lot of public institutions, governors have the ability to appoint board members. And so what that means is that they're kind of circumventing the election process. And so the public don't really know who these people are. And oftentimes, board appointees are donors to a governor's campaign. They might have been, some kind of friend, personal friend. There's a lot of politics in board appointments, as I kind of detail one instance, or Claudia Hampton's appointment, it was pretty political. And so with that, what I learned very quickly is how identity, particularly race and gender, play in board appointments, how people were not ready for this Black woman to come onto this board. There was a Black man on the board. His name was Edward Lee, but he was pretty silent. And what I mean by this is that he didn't really forcefully speak out on things like affirmative action and things like that. But I want to make sure I honor the fact that he was the first. But Hampton was the most probably influential of the trustees. She was the second longest serving in board history, serving 20 years. And had she not passed away, she probably would have made it to 30, because she was just that popular. And part of that popularity is that she navigated race and gender in a way that was very artful, given the fact that, we're talking about the 70s when the kind of Black social ethos is moving toward, Black power, the Black Panther movement. And here's this Black woman saying, no, I got to use pragmatism. And because I'm in other folks' institutions, and I can't go in there talking about what you have done to Black people and expect to get resources to increase the number of Black people in the institution. So some of the ways in which race and gender really played out is when she got, when Hampton was first appointed to the board, within a year, one of her first interactions, really bad interactions, and pardon my language, is one of the trustees yelled out, "There's a nigger in the woodpile," when he was having a conversation with her and other board members about affirmative action. And rather than call him out and clap back on him right in that moment, Hampton chose to, because everyone was appalled that this guy would say this. And so she turned to the person who was running the meeting and said, "Don't worry about it. We'll keep going with the meeting. I'll talk to this trustee, one-on-one." And so because she did not chastise him for something that was deeply offensive, it gained her favor with the other board members, who were mostly white men, because they saw her as being a moderate, that she did not get upset, and they could reason with her and have conversations with her about race, and she wouldn't make them feel bad. And so that's part of her sly civility, is downplaying race and gender in moments in order to gain capital later. So she would end up having this kind of social capital with the board because they said, well, Claudia is reasonable. We'll do this because Claudia said so. They wanted to, there was a fight I detail in the book. There was a discussion really about who's going to be the next president of Cal State Dominguez Hills, which has been known for many years as the HBCU of the West. And Hampton wanted a white man for this job. And, at first I was like, why did she want him instead of, a Black man? But because there was a political fight in the city of Carson between Japanese Americans and African Americans, and basically she wanted someone that she thought would be neutral but still promote affirmative action and diversity. And this is this white man that she had vetted herself. And so in order to get that person into the presidency, she negotiated with the powerful white men on the trustee board. They wanted there was one particular man who was super powerful. And she said, look, if you want this 6-foot art installation at Cal State Northridge, I'll give you that in order to get Donald Girth to become president of Cal State Dominguez Hills. So she called it the game of boardsmanship, where she would, cash in her chits when she needed to.
Now, let me ask you this. I know our time is beginning to run short. There's so much I wish we can unpack, but I have to ask this question for those that are hearing this and saying, well, I'm someone who I want to utilize my voice. I want to speak truth to power in these moments. They are an emerging leader, perhaps a future trustee or a brand new trustee, and they're hearing Dr. Hampton's just a little bit, and they're going to read the book. We know they're going to read the book. But how do they wrestle with this inner fire to say, no, I've got to stand for this, and this is authentic for me in those moments. I don't think I could have not spoken in that moment to the entire board in that moment if that trustee chose to use such language with me. Yet As we look at Dr. Hampton's story, we saw how strategically it continued to put her in positions of power to have long-term lasting impact. What can we take from this, Dr. Nicol? Do we stay quiet? Do we get smarter in some regards? Do we hold our tongue, or do we fire off the moment we feel led to fire off?
So what Hampton did, and the way I wrote the book, if you look from chapter 3 forward, I divided into two sets of strategies. The first strategy is how she built capital. And then the second set of strategies in chapter 4 is how she enacted the capital. So Hampton would pick and choose her battles. And there were times when she would speak forcefully on things, and there were other times when she would not. And so she really assessed where she could do the most good and when speaking would help that, and then when there were times when it would not help it. She also knew how to enlist other allies of color to help her when she needed to get things done. And then she also used her board service. So she served on 9 of the 10 standing board committees. And so she made sure she was always in the know about what was happening. So, if she's on the education policy committee, she knows she has to attend the finance committee because that's where all the funding goes. She had to serve on the public affairs committee because she knew that if the Cal States wanted support from the legislature, that's where they make the pitch. So she was very adept at figuring out where she could make the impact and when it was time to be quiet, when it was time to utilize her allies on the board. And then she also knew how to run meetings. She was board chair for 2 years, and she knew how to allow her supporters to speak first and put her opposition on the defense because they would have to speak afterwards. So I think it's all about being strategic about when you speak up. I had to learn this as a department chair. So I'm writing this book while I'm a department chair. So I'm learning from Claudia Hampton while I'm enacting some of her strategies. And people know that I am forceful, but I don't speak on everything all the time because my voice becomes everything and nothing if I use it all the time for things that are not as important. So I think it's a matter of really paying attention and strategizing when to speak up and when not to. And so your voice carries when people know that it's not for theatrics or it's not, to get a reaction, but I'm serious now. Now you're going to pay attention to my clap back.
I love it. I love it. I've enjoyed my time with you, Dr. Nicol. For those that know the show, you know that my very last question that I love to ask our guests, because the show is called Discovering Your Mission, I'm a personal believer that all of us have a mission that carries us in this work. And so I just want to create space now, Dr. Nicol, for you to share with us, what is your personal mission statement and why?
So my personal mission statement really comes from Jeremy Bentham's idea of utilitarianism. So to provide the greatest good for the greatest number. And what that means in higher education is to open up access, to promote social mobility of our students. It means to also reduce harm in our policies and our procedures, and to lead in a sort of way where that we're stewards of these resources in order to really promote kind of justice and opportunity. Most of our students are Pell eligible. Most of them are first and maybe second generation. Some of them are immigrant students. And so what can I do in order to provide the greatest good to the greatest number of people? And I think that because I grew up in the hood with folks, so I bring that. But I'm also a 4th generation college graduate, so I bring that too. So I'm bringing all of these things together in order to in many ways model after Claudia Hampton, becoming an instrumental leader where the leadership comes from me, that I'm willing to put myself on the line in a lot of ways in order to help provide the greatest good for the greatest number.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Once again, Dr. Donna J. Nicol, the Associate Dean at the California State University, Long Beach, and author of the book. You got to go buy this book, Black Woman on Board. We'll be sure to include the link to purchase this book in the description, certainly the website to Dr. Donna J. Nicol. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Nicol.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a powerful and thoughtful conversation with Dr. Donna J. Nicol. Her work reminds us that leadership is not always loud and it is not always immediate. Sometimes the most transformative leaders are the ones who understand strategy, who build trust over time, and who use their influence to open doors for others long after the meeting has ended. Through the story of Dr. Claudia Hampton, Dr. Nicol has given us a masterclass in what it means to lead with intention, patience, and purpose inside systems that were never designed with you in mind. Before we close, I want to leave you with 3 key takeaways from today's conversation. First, leadership requires strategy, not just passion. Dr. Hampton showed us that it's not always about reacting in the moment. Sometimes it's about understanding the landscape, building capital, and choosing the right moment to use your voice for maximum impact. Second, a seat at the table is only the beginning. Representation matters, but true leadership is measured by what you do with that opportunity. Dr. Hampton didn't just hold a position, she used her influence to expand access and opportunity for others. And third, mission-driven leadership is always rooted in service. As Dr. Nicols shared, the goal is to provide the greatest good for the greatest number. When your leadership is anchored in service, your decisions become clearer and your impact becomes deeper. Friends, I want to leave you with this encouragement. You may find yourself in rooms where you feel outnumbered, underestimated, or even misunderstood. But your mission is not determined by the room you walk in. It is determined by the purpose you carry inside of you. Stay grounded in that purpose. Stay committed to the people you serve. And remember that even quiet, strategic leadership can leave a legacy that transforms lives for generations. Before we go, I want to extend a sincere thank you to our sponsor, the EDU Ledger, for supporting this show and helping us elevate conversations that matter across higher education and leadership communities nationwide. And if today's episode inspired you, I invite you to continue to walk this journey with me. Visit itsdrmordecai.com for more leadership insights, upcoming conversations, and resources designed to help you live and lead with purpose. Until next time, my friends, stay encouraged, stay focused, and keep discovering your mission.